You've really got to prepare all these assets before you go out and start raising finance. Hey everyone, it's Alexi here from Exile Entertainment. In this video, I'm going to take you through the assets that you need and don't need to be able to go out and raise finance for your film. So really there are kind of like 6 core assets that you're going to need to put in place before you go and start raising finance. And when I say raising finance, it means from any type of company or person. So I'm talking about private equity, sales agents, distributors, tax incentives, government grants, anything like that. You really need to line up all these documents first, have them in place, and then go and start trying to raise. Because there's nothing worse than going and trying to raise money and then people saying, yeah, well, come back to me when you have like this document or you need this document to apply. You really, when you contact someone or you get in touch with a company, you want to have all your assets ready to fire so that when they ask for them, you can send them straight through. So what I'm going to do in this video is tell you what those assets are. Then I'm going to tell you which combination of assets you need for each different type of finance that you're raising, because you don't actually need all of them. You need combinations of each of them depending on who you're raising from. So I'm going to take you through those. And then I'm going to also tell you what I think you don't need in terms of assets that some people often get a bit tripped up on and think that they really do need these things, but actually they're not the things that move the needle. So make sure you stick around to the end to get all that info. So let's start with what the assets actually are. So the assets that you need to go and raise finance are: number 1, a screenplay; number 2, a finance plan; number 3, you need a budget; number 4, you need a lookbook, or it's otherwise referred to as a creative treatment, but basically like a creative document that is able to convey the creative vision for the film. The next one is an investment deck. So that's something that is basically like a summary, a visual summary of what you're planning to do on the financial side. So it's not a legal document, but it's something that is useful to pitch to investors. And then finally, you need the legal paperwork, you need the legal framework behind actually going and raising finance. And so I'll take you through all of those quickly, but important to note for that last one, for the legal paperwork, that does differ depending on what country or even what state you're in. So let's run through these really quick. Screenplay. You want to make sure the screenplay is ready to send out. So you want to make sure that you're well and truly at the end of development. If you feel like there are still changes that you want to make to the screenplay, or if you feel like the screenplay just could be better, you might be able to get more input and raise the level of the script, then do that first before going out and raising finance. So that's number 1. Number 2 is the finance plan. So you need to be able to clearly show how you're going to raise the budget for the film and what the different sources of finance are. Number 3, the budget. That's an obvious one. So just make sure that the budget and the finance plan match, right? So your total finance should equal your total budget. I want to stop there for a second because those 3 documents, screenplay, finance plan, budget, they're really your foundations. They're the things that more than anything are really important for the internal company, or the producer. You need to fully understand those 3 documents and how they work together in order to then create the film. And one thing to keep in mind is that these documents, as you're creating them, are live documents, right? So you don't just create your budget once and be done with it, or your finance plan and be done with it, or even your script and be done with it. Those 3 things are live documents until they all click together. And then when they all click together and you're able to raise the finance, that's when they become locked. But until that point in time, they are flexible. So those are the first 3. Next one is your lookbook. So you want to make sure that that is a really visually enticing document, because that's going to be used to basically sell your project. It's going to be used to get people excited. Next one is investment deck. That's basically to convey to people in plain English with some visuals that you understand what you're doing, that you clearly understand the financial risk and the potential upside of the project, but more importantly, the risk, and that you have a clear plan to attach distribution. You have a clear pathway to audience and distribution, so the investor can look at that and say, okay, lookbook looks great, I'm excited by the project, but they also know what they're talking about, they know what they're doing, and they have a plan. And then the sixth one is the legal paperwork. So if you're in Australia, you basically need an investment agreement. You don't even need to have set up the company that's going to produce the film. You can have an investment agreement. The investor can sign that. They can, if you want to get those funds immediately, they can transfer those funds to your lawyer's trust account, which in America is called an escrow account, and they can sit in there until you finance the film, and that will trigger them then coming into your production account. And if you're in the US, there are many more requirements around raising finance, and particularly private equity. I'm not going to take you through each of those in this particular video. I will do that in another video. But for now, it's just important to know that there are more legal requirements, documents that you need to create as part of your, the SEC requirements. So you have all these 6 lined up, you have them ready to go. At that point, you're ready to start raising finance. So let's take you through which documents you need for which people. Number 1, private equity. In order to raise private equity, the documents that are most important are your lookbook, your investment deck, and the legal paperwork. So in my experience, it's very rare for an investor to ask for a screenplay, a finance plan, or a budget. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? Which is why you want them ready. But in my experience, I've actually never had a private equity investor ask for any of those 3 documents. The way that we pitch to them is we lead with the lookbook. If that piques their interest, then we send the investment deck and try and organize a call with them. And then if they're ready to invest, they've indicated that they want to invest, then the next stage is to send the legal paperwork in order to close the deal. So those are the 3 things you need to raise private equity. The second one that I'm going to take you through is distributors and sales agents. So with distributors and sales agents, in order to get them on board during the financing stage, you need the lookbook, the screenplay, a finance plan, and sometimes a budget. So I'll take you through that. The way that we pitch to and close sales agents is we lead with the lookbook, so we get them excited about the creative, because for them, it's really important for them to be able to visualize what this film's going to look like, understand the team behind it, what the style of it is. If that gets them interested, we send the screenplay. At that point, the screenplay has to do the heavy lifting, right? So if the screenplay is no good, doesn't matter how good your lookbook was, it's not going to get picked up. So the screenplay, and that's the importance of getting your screenplay right and making sure it's ready to send out. Because it's, especially if you don't have really good relationships with these sales agents, it'll be hard to get them to read the script again. So you mainly get one shot and you want to make it worth it. So you send the screenplay. If they've read the screenplay and they're interested, they'll want to know how much you want. And they'll also want to see your finance plan, because they'll want to know A, what the budget is, and B, how much you're asking from them as a percentage of the total finance. Because typically sales agents want to be putting in anywhere from about 10 to 20% of the total finance. That's just a rule of thumb that they have. And so they'll want to make sure that what you're asking basically fits within that ratio. So the finance plan they'll want to see. And then if you move to contracting, often at that stage, then they'll want to see the budget. So that's sales agents and distributors. So let's now talk about tax incentives. So tax incentives will often want most or all of the finance in place in order for them to process it. So what's really important for them is the finance plan, the budget, the screenplay. Sometimes it helps to send the lookbook. We often do. They don't need to see the investment deck, right? They don't need to see the how you're raising from everyone. They will need to see all the financing agreements, and so all that paperwork is going to be important. And what's interesting about the tax incentive is usually they want to come in at a point where a lot of that stuff is already lined up. So in Australia, for example, you need to at least present the finance plan and show how you're going to finance it. You don't need all your agreements, private equity agreements in place, but you need to show how you're going to do that. And in the US, it differs state by state. So you basically want to check what the criteria are for each of them. Now, with tax incentives, there are some tax incentives that require you to have a distributor attached in order to apply. And so if you're going, like if that's part of the requirement, then what you would do is you'd use all the assets I spoke about to land your distributor. And then once you get that agreement, you would then apply for the tax incentive. And then finally, number 4 is grants. So in order to raise finance from a grant, I'd say this one will definitely differ the most because different grants will have very different requirements. But again, the key ones are going to be your screenplay, your lookbook more so. Finance plan might be less important here. Budget, they won't need to see the investment deck, and they likely won't need to see all your paperwork, all the paperwork that you're using to raise private equity. So those are the 4 kind of key sources of finance that you would use to raise finance for a film. And those are all the assets that you're going to need. And so I encourage you to get all those ready, line them all up, and be ready when you go out to be able to use those combinations as you're pitching the film. So let's talk about which assets you likely don't need to raise finance. Now, a big one here that I think people trip up on is a proof of concept or a sizzle or a teaser. Now, if you've never made a short film, if you have no previous work that you're willing to show people, then that's the time where I think a proof of concept or a sizzle could be useful, right? It can help in order to sell the film, but really where it's going to help the most is sales agents and distributors. I don't think that those assets really move the needle much with private equity. They're not going to make a difference with tax incentives or grants. And so really you're only using it for sales agents and distributors. And that's 10 to 20% of the total finance. So this is where you need to weigh up, like, is it worth going and spending 10 or 20 grand on a sizzle or a proof of concept or even 5 grand for 10 to 20% of the finance? Or are you better off going out and trying to raise private equity without a sizzle and, because that could be 50 to 80% of your finance. And then sure, if you raise all that private equity and you need to attach a sales agent and a distributor and you're worried that you don't have any good previous work, at that point you could go and shoot a proof of concept or a sizzle, and at that point you're going to have a lot of confidence that the film's going to get financed. And you may, part of raising the finance, you may even allocate some of that to development, right? So you could raise some of the private equity, have some of it become a development budget, and then use that to shoot the proof of concept. So if you have short films that that you're proud of, that you're willing to show a sales agent or a distributor to show that, your work, your kind of level of work, your style, the quality of your work, then you don't need to go and shoot a proof of concept. They are going to look at, like I said, the lookbook. If they like that, they'll read your screenplay. If they like that, they'll want to know about the finance. And then they'll want to watch, potentially a short film of yours. And look, they might not even always ask for that anyway. But, it's better to assume that they will and to have that, ready. So with the proof of concept, again, I think it's easy to get stuck on, like, I need to shoot a sizzle or a proof of concept in order to finance my film. It's not really the case. And so what you want to avoid is spending too much time, too much effort, and too much focus on something that's really not moving the needle the most out of all of those things. So that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. Hope it was informative. And now you know exactly the assets that you need in order to go and raise finance for your film. So if you like the video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, drop your comments in the comments section below. Let me know what you thought of the video and what other topics you'd like me to cover on this channel. And if you are interested in getting some help raising finance for your film, then head to the link in the description below and you'll be able to set up a time to speak with me or my team to see if we can help you do that. So that's it for this video, and I'll see you on the next one.